Hi, Nix, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you on. For anyone who's looking on the YouTube channel, I am sitting in my dress that I wear when I'm out in my garden. I'm a little bit sweaty. I'm a little bit muddy. Literally just popped on in 10 minutes before this call from planting my raspberry leaf bushes. Well, if you're listening, you can't see my sweaty self. We are going to dive on into Nix's birth stories today. And Nix, I've had the pleasure of knowing you, I think first when um you purchased the natural birth course, but I don't think I saw you in the village until you actually applied to be in the mentorship, right? Were you in the village beforehand?
No, I wasn't. So I purchased the natural birth course and I was listening to all the podcast episodes, and that was where I heard the advert for the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship. And I think an email came through actually a couple of weeks before it started saying we have a spot left. And I just had this sort of feeling come over me of this, I want to do it. This feels right. So that's when I reached out to you and said, this might be absolutely crazy, but shall I do it? I'm about to have a baby, but is this a good time? So we had a call then and we decided it was a full body yes. And then
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, and it's been such a pleasure to get to know you and have you in the mentorship. And yeah, I'm amazed at, your calling to do this, like while pregnant and like literally, yes, birthing in the middle of the mentorship, like literally in the middle, I think, like
It
month three
was.
or something, wasn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, and I'd love to hear like your takeaways about really like having both your pregnancy and your postpartum within this mentorship, like how that has, been for you. But we're obviously here to talk about your birth stories. When you
Yeah.
were pregnant this time, you were pregnant with your second.
Yes.
And so you had a bubble before. So let's dial on back to when you became pregnant the first time and how that one didn't really end up the way you wanted, and how you, after that, really with this, oh my God, this second birth. I mean, I know it because we've had a birth debrief and we've talked about it in the mentorship and in the village. But yes, I want everyone to hear this amazing birth you had for your second. But first, take us back.
Yes. So I fell pregnant. It was the end of the first year of COVID, so end of 2020. And we were having a bit of a rubbish end to the year. So it came at quite a tough time for our family. So my dad had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and we'd lost an uncle and it was COVID. So we were all apart and isolating. And we found out we were pregnant in November. And we actually suffered an early pregnancy loss with that first pregnancy. So it was this huge kind of combination of quite sad events that happened all at once. And then I actually fell pregnant again about 2 weeks later. So it was on the very next
Mm.
cycle. So it was quite a strange time because it was this huge low and then this huge high again, and a really big roller coaster of emotions. And looking back, it's quite interesting because I don't think I fully processed that first pregnancy loss fully at the time because we got pregnant again so quickly. So that's still something now I'm still yet to do a ceremony for that, and it's something I will do. But that was how it all came about the first time, and we weren't consciously trying to conceive at that point. And so it was a surprise when we found out we were pregnant, and then when we lost it, me and my partner were both devastated. So in a way, it was really lovely the second time when we got pregnant because we knew we really wanted it and we were really calling that second baby in. So yeah, it was an interesting start to the pregnancy. And then that first pregnancy, the same with both pregnancies, I've never suffered too much in the first trimester. So I didn't get much morning sickness. I was very, very, very tired, as most women are, especially in the evenings, but generally felt really well. And we knew from the start of this birth, well, I knew that I really wanted a home birth. The last couple of years, I'd done my yoga teacher training, and I had done my pregnancy yoga teacher training earlier that summer. So it's something I was kind of naturally really interested in. And I've actually got the timeline wrong on that. I hadn't done my trainings at that point. That was before the second baby, but I was still very, very interested in the whole like birthing world. So we knew we wanted a home birth, and we quite quickly started looking for a doula. And where we live in Bristol in the UK, we're very lucky. There's a lot of really wonderful birth workers here. So we started down that journey, and we found a really lovely doula in our area. But still, I wasn't that informed about birth with this pregnancy. So I knew a lot about optimum conditions to birth in, and you know, roughly how a natural birth works. But I didn't spend a lot of time really kind of educating myself. We just kind of going down the route of it's all going to be great. We're going to have a home birth and it's just going to work out. And we did a very basic kind of NCT course. But it, you know, the content in that was, you know, this is how you change a nappy, and this is it wasn't great. So the early pregnancy was fine. And then for some reason at around 28 weeks, we were booked in for a growth scan. And I remember asking the midwife, you know, why are we having this scan? And she looked through my notes and she said, oh, I don't know. There's nothing in here that indicates you need to have one. And again, not knowing as much as I do now, me and my partner just thought, great, you know, let's have another scan. We'll get to see the baby. I wasn't aware at that time of how kind of inaccurate scans can be, and potentially harmful to the baby, you know, and yeah, I wouldn't have accepted that this time around. But we went to that scan, and they picked up that a couple of the measurements were looking a little bit small. So then we had to come back again in another couple of weeks. And it was at that second scan where suddenly it was like all warning bells went off. They were like, your baby isn't growing, it's really small. And it was, you know, we were absolutely blindsided at that point. I think we were only, I can't remember the exact gestation, but we were about 32 weeks, I think, at that point. And, you know, we had one nurse come in, and, you know, she sort of was like, oh yeah, you're probably going to be induced today. And, you know, there was no conversations or bedside manner. It was just this huge kind of like alarm, and we just were in absolute bits, and we were just treated really badly, and it was really poorly managed. And we had this horrible couple of hours, and we were left alone in this room, and I was sort of in floods of tears, and we didn't know what was going on. And then everything kind of calmed down, and we saw another doctor, and they were like, oh no, sorry, no, everything's fine. And we were being passed back and forth between lots of people, and it was all very confusing. But basically what came about from there was that they were worried we had fetal growth restriction. And so from that point in the pregnancy, it was just quite negative. It was quite a horrible experience from then until the end. I was suffering very badly with anxiety, obviously worrying about what's going on with the baby. And every growth scan we had, you know, it wasn't great news, and they kept saying, you know, you got to come back, and then we're probably going to induce you very soon, but we didn't really have a timeline. And because of the waiting times as well in hospital, every growth scan we would have to go to this fetal monitoring clinic, and we could be sat there for 8 hours. And it was midsummer, and it was boiling hot under these really white lights. And I remember feeling physically sick, just sat in this little chair and just crying and wanting to go home. And they were like, no, you have to wait for the doctor to come. And it was just not a pleasant experience. And I was taken fully out of my body at that point, and really wasn't in tune with my intuition, because we were just being told constantly, something's wrong, something is wrong. And what's interesting is I remember very clearly one of the doctors saying on one of the growth scans, you know, everything is perfect. The flow is really good from the placenta. Everything looks great. Your baby is just really small. And knowing what I know now, if the flow is good from the placenta, everything is fine. Like, everything
Yeah.
is fine. And probably the best place for your baby is to stay inside your
Yeah.
tummy rather than to
And
come.
obviously we have done a birth debrief about this and talked to each other a lot about this. And your family has small babies.
We do.
So also looking at who is carrying this baby. And
Yeah.
it really is, because one of the things with intrauterine growth restriction is that the placenta, the flow to the baby is restricted. The baby is not growing well because of the placenta not delivering what it should be delivering. But you were told it was fine. It was just a small baby.
Yeah.
And why
Yeah.
would you
And
then
that's
rush that baby out? It's absolutely the opposite. The baby needs to be inside to keep on growing, right? And it's really in the last few weeks and even days that the baby's really put on fat.
Yeah, and that's a really important point is, my grandmother, my mum, and I've got two sisters, they've all had babies. All of them birthed babies that were between 6 and 7 pounds. So that is very normal for my family. And I remember saying this to the doctor. Um, and, we had one different doctor on one of the days who threatened, the dead baby card, unfortunately, as we hear so often on these
Mm,
podcasts. And because we had a doula, we were trying to get facts from him. So I remember saying, okay, he was writing the paperwork then and there in the meeting for an induction on the following Monday before we'd even agreed to it, which is not even legal, I don't think. And we were trying to get statistics from him because our doula was like, make sure you get the facts and then you can go away and make an informed decision. And he was quite, you could tell he was quite angry at that we were sort of requesting this information. And yeah, it was just a really tricky situation to navigate. And I remember sitting with myself in silence a lot, really trying to tap into the baby and try and feel, what is the right thing to do. But I couldn't hear anything at that point because all I was hearing was the noise from the hospital. And first
of
time round,
course.
we're terrified,
Yeah, of
and
course. And if someone says dead baby card, which is so violent, like that is obstetric violence at its finest, and it happens every day, it's so violent to say such a thing. Of course, you won't hear anything else. Of course, you want your baby to be, of course, you want to have a live baby. Like, if anyone say that, how
yeah,
could anyone, if you don't know absolutely every statistics in and out, and like,
yeah,
now obviously you have totally different knowledge going through this mentorship, but like women don't have that. You don't
yeah,
have that from a normal birth course. Like you almost have to have a degree in midwifery or like take something like the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship to have the right facts,
yeah.
to actually have a conversation with this doctor and presenting, actually, here's the evidence. And yeah, you
And
didn't
it's
have
really
that.
sad because it shouldn't be on the women to have that
No,
knowledge.
no.
We shouldn't be having to, educate ourselves to the level of a midwife just to have the birth we want. But and what's funny as well is whenever I bring up that situation with that doctor, immediately whatever midwife I speak to is like, oh, is that Dr. X? They know.
Mm.
And it's, how is he still allowed to be doing this to women? But
Yeah, how can you be such an a-hole and say such things and be still allowed to practice? There should be some sort of police about that, right? All the censoring that's going on everywhere. Why is no one censoring these obstetricians that are telling women that their baby's going to die if they don't listen to daddy doctor?
yeah, yeah. So by the end of pregnancy, we were just aiming to get to 37 weeks. We were like, if we can keep this baby in there this long, we've done well. And it never crossed my mind actually that I could still opt for a home birth if I wanted to, because we were obviously staring down the barrel of a medicalized birth in the hospital. The midwife-led units said we can't birth there because they don't take small babies. But with a home birth, you can choose to have one in whatever situation, as long as you accept the risks in the UK. And but that didn't ever really cross my mind. We were all we thought was we were going to be induced. So that's what happened. We got to 37 weeks and we went in for our induction. And we'd spoken a lot with our doula about what was going to happen. So we were prepared to fight as much as we could to still keep things in our control, as far as we could with a medicalized birth. So I was quite lucky with our induction because we managed to get through the whole I'll say procedure, because it was a procedure, I guess, the whole birth without any drugs. So we started off with having, it was called a cook balloon, but I think, is it called a foley?
Catheter. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
a balloon that you blow up inside the cervix that mimics the head that then
yeah,
sends these signals to produce oxytocin and to start labor kind of thing, puts pressure on the cervix to
yeah.
initiate that. Um, so
So I had,
that's without
yeah,
drugs, obviously, that's a balloon. It's very uncomfortable though, however.
it's horrible. And you have this big sort of wire hanging out from your vagina, sort of for 24 hours. You're trying to walk around, and yeah, it wasn't nice. So I had that, and then that was in overnight, and I had a few minor contractions that night, and my partner had to go home because it was still COVID. So I was left alone in this hospital room and was very scared and didn't feel in control at all. But then everything died out, and then the next day we were booked in for the actual grand event of the induction, and of course there were delays, so we were sort of waiting around all day. We actually snuck out of hospital that day and we went for a lovely lunch down the road and didn't tell anyone because we thought, well, this is silly, we're not going to just stay and wait in this room all day. It was a lovely summer's day.
Did you have the balloon inside as well?
Yeah, I had these compression socks on. I must look like I left like a mental patient coming
Yeah.
out. So we broke out of hospital and had a lovely day and then came back. So we were trying to keep it really lighthearted together and just make the best of it. And then what happened? We went into our sort of room we were going to have the birth, and my partner, bless him, it was really funny. He went home and he basically brought our entire like living room back to the hospital. So this is a really good word of advice if you are going to a hospital birth. You can bring in whatever you want. So we had our lamp, our rug, our duvet, we had fairy lights up, we had all our affirmations on the walls, we had our birthing playlist, and we had so many of these battery powered tea lights, and that's all we had lighting the room. And the doctor was like, oh, I'm gonna need light for my notes, and we just said, no, here's 20 tea lights, put them around your computer and then you can see what you're doing. And so she agreed to that. So we were quite forceful with making sure we had our environment set up. And then, yeah, she broke my waters. This was in the evening. Yeah, she broke my waters, and contractions, yeah, the first sensations just started quite quickly after that. And typically they give you a time limit of 2 hours, and then they would put you on the drip with some, I think it's Syntocin and the fake oxytocin, and that would then ramp the induction up. But we were quite forceful, and because I was starting to have sensations, we said, no, there's no point putting us on that just yet because stuff is happening, leave us be. So
Great.
she left us for another couple of hours, and then it just ramped up and labor started. So I'm so grateful for that because, yeah, we managed to sort of just have the breaking of the waters and then have labor start. So it ramped up quite quickly. It was very intense, very fast. And even though we weren't on the drip, I think because it was earlier than my body would have necessarily wanted, it just went from 0 to 10. And I was completely overwhelmed with the sensations. Our doula came and she was amazing, and she was working with my partner to put heat compressors at the base of my spine, and they were pressing down during surges, which was amazing. And I was very sick as well, so I was vomiting a lot. And yeah, it just got very intense, and I got very overwhelmed at one point, and was I think I was I did have a vaginal examination. I think I wanted one just to see where I was. And I was 5 centimeters. This was after about 4 hours, so it was quite quick to get to that point. But I remember being very deflated because in my mind I was like, I'm only 5. I've got so far to go, even though that's super quick still for a first birth in an induction. And yeah, so I think my mental state kind of deteriorated quite quickly after that check, which again, that's such a good reason perhaps not to get checked because as we all know, things can change so quickly.
So quickly. And I think it's a great thing you're just like pointing out now that it can really deflate you. And then your mind gets in the way. And then maybe also it even if you weren't already kind of feeling maybe a bit overwhelmed, it would really fling you into that though, like even more so potentially. And you need to have your spirits high, not be
Yeah.
deflated. Yeah.
And at that point, I lost control of managing it. So I just went into complete fear space. And the whole birth, I could see the doctor out of the corner of my eye. She was this woman, and she was sort of, taking notes, and then she would be whispering to someone in the corner, looking at me, and I just felt completely observed. And every time they were whispering, I was thinking something's wrong, something's not right. Because it was an induction, we had the continuous monitoring, which, every time, yeah, you always think something's wrong when you've got someone monitoring you every time they were whispering. So that obviously really didn't help my mental state. So I got to the point when I was basically looking at my partner screaming, I'm going to die and that I need an epidural immediately. And, they were like, are you sure that's what you want? And I said, yes, it is. And so they called the anaesthetist in and he managed to put the cannula in my hand. And it's crazy because he walked in and he was all jolly. He was like, hello, can you just sit still for me? And I was, in the middle of these and huge waves of like sensation, screaming. I'm just looking at him like, are you kidding me? No, I can't sit down. And it was at that point my doula was like, can you just check her again? I think she'd seen the purple line on my bum, and noticing that I couldn't sit down on the chair. So they checked me and I was fully dilated. So there was no time to have an epidural, which is amazing because I would have really, really regretted that. So like off the anaesthetist merrily walked. He was like, okay, goodbye. And it was interesting because looking back, there were so many signs of transition there. Like I was being sick, I was screaming I was going to die. I completely, was overwhelmed at that point, saying I couldn't do it. And, no one picked up on I was probably in transition and probably nearly fully dilated.
Because how
And
many hours had it been since you had the 5 centimeter check?
it wasn't that long after that. I lose track of time, but probably about 3 hours.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
the thing again, just the belief in the linear,
Yeah.
right? The belief that you wouldn't be fully after 3 hours. Your first time mom, you're 37 weeks, you're being induced.
Yeah.
No way that you would be fully at 3 hours after being 5. But here you are.
Yeah.
That's how you labor and birth.
Yeah. And I remember them saying to me, oh, do you feel like pushing? And I was quite out of it by that point. And I don't remember having the sensation to push. Um, Not like in the second birth where it just happened. But with every contraction that came, I was pushing, and we were there for like 3 hours, I think, and it was really hardcore, and I was absolutely exhausted. I was giving it my all. Um,
Did you start pushing because you were fully, not because you were feeling it? Because they were telling you you're fully now, you can start pushing. So you
I
was,
think so. Looking back, I think
yeah.
it's very hazy,
Mm.
but I certainly didn't have that feeling where it just happens and you're pushing.
So
No,
this is key information because you can be fully and you can go around freaking being fully and
Mm.
not being ready to push because the baby's still very high. So the baby needs to come down, and that can take an hour or more when you're fully dilated. I'm doing quotation marks because, fully, whatever, fully, and so then you would have been pushing, exhausting yourself when actually you should just have been resting, or, as much as you can when you have full-blown labor. But you know what I mean? That's what you should have been encouraged to do, not
Yeah.
push if you don't feel pushy.
Yeah.
Always, always follow your body.
Yeah. And again, I didn't know all of this, you're just sort of following
Oh,
what they're telling you. And
yes.
it got to the point where I think there were murmurings about, oh, we need to, have something to help the baby out. And that was probably going to be forceps or a suction. And thank God my doula was there, because she said, let's just try the birthing stool she'd brought with her. And so she got me to sit on this little birthing stool, and she put like a it wasn't a rope, but it was like something to pull on around my partner's neck for me to pull down on. And we ended up staying in that position until the end, and did manage to birth our baby um, that way, which was good, without needing intervention. But again, at that point, they put one of the little electro
The
fetal
feet.
electrode, yeah, scalp electrode into our baby's head, which is something I still haven't made peace with in myself.
Hmm.
In that moment, they asked for consent, and you're completely out of it. And they say, we can't hear the baby's heartbeat. We were a bit concerned. Can we put this in? And you're like, yes, yes, go for it. And
Hmm.
we we know that when the baby is um coming out, the heart rate can drop, and that's normal. So yeah, we had one of those in the baby's head, which is, yeah, still really makes me desperately sad to my core. And then because it was taking so long, I had an episiotomy as well. And again, that might not have been needed if I'd just been given more time.
Yes,
I,
absolutely. And like pushing has labor and birth has no time limit.
yeah,
It really doesn't. In hospital, you're given generally 2 hours to push. And then it's like, oh, it's taking too long. We need to intervene, right? And in some places it's shorter, some places it's longer. And because you were pushing, obviously, before you even had your own internal feeling of wanting to push, you were probably pushing much more of that time
yeah,
with your belly muscles, with your will, and not actually your womb, right? Which you now have the experience of in a totally different birth scenario. And I really want listeners to hear this. Like, there is no time limit in pushing. You can push for hours. There's no time limit in pushing. It doesn't all of a sudden go like 2 hours, all of a sudden the baby's in distress, or the mama is in distress. It's not like that. And I just really wanted women to hear that.
yeah, so important. But he did come out. He did have a hand over his face, so that also might have been why it was taking a little bit longer. Uh,
Absolutely. Compounding hand for sure. That's extra space. Like, you're adding some more that's going to come out that, you know,
he
needs
came out
time.
super healthy, and he was screaming immediately and on my chest. But I don't recall having a golden hour. Like, it's just one big blur. And I remember just feeling completely just like I'd come out of a war at the end. And unfortunately, because of the state I was in, I did hemorrhage quite badly. So they had to actively manage the third stage with the delivery of the placenta. And of course, I was stitched up, and it was just this awful feeling of just wanting to be left alone, and just having all these people swarming around, doing things that still really hurt my body. And I remember just sobbing and sobbing and screaming, can everyone just go away? And yeah, it wasn't the kind of the golden hour I was envisaging with the birth. Um, so yeah, and then we were in hospital for a few days because he was so small. He had a bit of jaundice, so he had to go in one of these light boxes, which again was quite distressing to see. And he had antibiotics. Again, I'm not sure why, because yeah, anyway, all of these extra interventions that happened because we were in hospital. So there were a lot of positives with that first birth. We were induced, we managed to birth vaginally. Is that the right word? Vaginally.
Yeah.
We, that didn't sound right. Yeah, we managed to birth, without drugs, without needing a cesarean, relatively quickly. So there's so many things to be grateful for and be really proud of. But there were also a lot of things which, I had to do a lot of work to process, and I'm still processing. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was the first birth.
Yeah. Yeah. I really feel you for that. And this is such a normal story, unfortunately, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is the new normal. They're really, really looking for small and big babies.
Yeah.
And both small and big babies are not an issue. They're not. Only if it's true intrauterine growth restriction, and that is when the placenta actually is showing lack of, resistance or bad flow to the baby, which you can see on an ultrasound, which they never saw in your baby. So,
And he was 5 pounds 3, which I think is 2.36 kilograms. So he
mm,
was small, but you know,
had he been left to when
yeah,
he wanted to be birthed, maybe at 42 weeks,
yeah,
he would have
right.
been not, yeah.
Yeah, I'm almost certain he would have been a normal size for our family.
Mm.
So yeah,
So, from this birth, though, you become
yeah.
pregnant again. Was that planned or was that a surprise
Um,
as well?
it was interesting because I was starting to have a real feeling that a baby was going to come soon, but it's not something that me and my partner had discussed as being right, we're ready. But I'd had a few really vivid dreams, and I remember thinking, yeah, I think a baby's coming soon. But we weren't actively trying. And then, yeah, I found out I was pregnant, and I was over the moon. It just was amazing news. So our firstborn was just coming up to 2 years at this point. So it was quite a shock for my partner. But after he got over that initial shock, he was really happy. And immediately, as soon as I found out I was pregnant, it was like there was this fire in my belly, and I was like, we are owning this pregnancy this time around. We are doing things our way, and we're going to take every lesson we learned and just like, just, yeah, just make this birth our own. Very early on this second time round, that was when I purchased your natural birth course. Um, and I just started listening to so many of your natural birth stories, natural birth podcast. And I just started kind of just totally immersing myself in that positive birth story medicine. And it was just incredible. And the knowledge you gain just from listening to stories was just amazing, because every single, like, so many different scenarios you can imagine, are covered in these stories, and just the knowledge you gain from that was just really, really incredible, and just feeling so much more prepared than I was the first time round. And obviously your natural birth course was amazing. And I got my partner really involved too. So he's been amazing right from, birth number one. I was like, we're going to have a home birth. He was like, great, that sounds good. Yep, let's do it. Wasn't phased at all, which I know can take time with some partners. So this time round again, he was really on board. And, from a partner perspective, he was quite traumatized after our first birth because he had to witness all of these things happen to me in the hospital. And he was a bit fearful this time, particularly with like hemorrhaging,
Mm.
about how we would manage that at home. So we did a lot of work together. We had birth evenings, like we tried to do it every week, but every sort of second or third week we'd sit down and we'd watch one of the videos from the natural birth course together, particularly around the sort of stages of labor and pain management and releasing your fears. And every week I would pick an episode of the Natural Birth podcast and send it to him and say, this is your homework for this week. Listen to this one. So he was great. I'd often come in when he was working and just hear like, and then the head was crowning.
I love that so much. I always wonder who, it's about 5% of men listening to this podcast. I always wonder who they are. And I think it is women's partners, probably that just like you that are sending like, listen to this one, you know?
But it was really helpful, and yeah, it was just nice, and it made me feel like, you know, he was really on board as well in sort of getting prepared. So this pregnancy was just dreamy, and from the start it was very similar to the first time round. So I didn't have any morning sickness. I felt really good, just really tired in the first trimester, and then in the second trimester just felt great. And I didn't tell the hospital I was pregnant. I think it was until I was 12 weeks. It was really nice just to have it to ourselves. And I was going to go longer actually. And then I thought we discussed it and we thought we did want to have that 12-week scan. So I let them know at that point. Apologies if you can hear squeaks, that's just my baby feeding. So we let the hospital know, and then we went for that first scan, and everything was everything was great, everything was fine. They couldn't get a very good measurement because the baby was in the wrong position. So they said, oh, you're gonna have to come back, and we just said no, we're only gonna have this one scan, so take it or leave it. So she just got what she could. And it was interesting because is the dating scan the first one or the second one?
Yeah.
First
No, that's the, well, it depends. Some people go in to confirm a pregnancy at like 7 weeks and does a scan at that time.
one.
And then so then that would be the second. But no, the 12-week one around, it's like 11, 10 to 11, 12 weeks time. That's the dating scan. In most countries, actually in Sweden, they do it at the 20-week scan, which is not evidence-based, which is very curious, but most
Wow.
places do it at 12 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was funny is because the baby wasn't in the best position, she actually said to us, "Oh, I'm not sure how accurate this is. We're just going to go with this date." And then obviously that's the date that's on your file, and like everything is based upon
Yeah,
in terms of if
gosh.
you're overdue. So my calculated date was the 27th of March, based on our known conception date and the date of my last cycle. So I was pretty confident on that date.
And what
And
did the scan say?
21st of this.
A whole week you lost.
Mm. But I wasn't phased because I just thought, well, I'm happy going overdue, even if it's 43, 44. So who cares?
Yeah. Well, that's
Um,
the only difference is if you go with the NHS, they might not care for you, right?
yeah, well, they're pretty good here. I think what happens is because I did, jumping ahead a bit, but I got to 41 and a half weeks. And all that happens is they have well, in the city where we live, they have a team called Birth Choices. And if you are still planning to home birth against medical guidelines, they will ring you and have a full chat with you where they basically outline all of the risks, just so you're aware of all of them, and you have to agree consent that you've been told all the risks and that you're happy to proceed.
Well,
So
that's brilliant. But it's
yeah,
that's very rare. And maybe it's something in your area. I don't think it's all of the UK. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's not all of the UK. It depends probably where you are and the services provided. But that's amazing that that's provided in your area. That's gold standard. I mean, that's how it should be. And I'm so happy that that's the reality where you were.
yeah, because I had my phone call booked in for the overdue chat at
Yeah.
41, at 42 weeks, but we never didn't have to have it in the end. So yeah, we went for the 12-week scan, everything was fine. And then we just enjoyed pregnancy this time around, and it was night and day to the first time. I was very anxious throughout the whole of the first pregnancy, largely because we'd had early pregnancy loss and then
Mm.
because of growth concerns. And this time around, I just felt very, very relaxed in myself. A large part of your natural birth course is, you know, bonding with baby, fear releasing, visualizing your dream birth. So I was just doing all of these practices and just feeling really, really connected with the baby and my intuition, and just really confident in myself, and just I just really trusted that everything was going to be fine this time. And we talked about getting a doula, but unfortunately, we just couldn't afford it this time around. And we also looked at private midwife, but it's, you know, a private midwife here in the UK is £5,000 to £7,000,
That's a
which is,
lot.
you
Wow.
know, the average person, that's unaffordable, really. And I really am, you know, an advocate for it's worth spending money on this rather than, you know, all these fancy baby things. But that level of money at this point in our lives is just too much.
Mm.
And even a doula was stretching us at the point we were, you know,
Mm.
in our lives. So we just thought we're really well informed this time. Let's just go for it with the home birth team.
Mm.
And yeah, so we went back for our 20-week scan. Everything was fine again then. Again, the baby wasn't in a good position and they wanted to rebook us in, and we just said no. And that was the last time we set foot in hospital, which is just fills me with so much joy. And that was my aim with this pregnancy, was to just have those 2 scans, and that was it. So that was brilliant. And we're very lucky where we live. We have a really phenomenal home birth team here. There's about 8 midwives. Maybe there's more. I think there's about 8 midwives on the team. And you don't get assigned a dedicated midwife, but you would meet all of them prior to your birth. So you would be familiar with whoever turned up. So at 28 weeks, we got handed over to the home birth team, and it was just brilliant from that moment on. And I don't know why all women do not do this in our city, because all of your appointments are at your house with the home birth team, and they come to you and they take their time, and we chat for like half an hour, 45 minutes, and they were all just so like-minded and just so brilliant, and that the way they would present things, and it was all very much women-centered. Yeah, just very grateful we have this here on the NHS, because it was night and day to the midwives I saw at the GP or at the hospital. I really didn't gel with any of them, and the appointments I just was like, yep, okay, goodbye, because I just didn't want to be there. And some of their like terminology was just awful. So yeah, when we were with the home birth team, it was really great, and they were fantastic. And yeah, we were just really, really excited for the birth. And then everything got a bit dramatic, as you know. So we got to 38 weeks, and it was so ironic because on that day, me and my partner, we'd had a day booked at a spa. So we'd been out for the whole day. Our toddler was at childminders. And we came home, and my partner opened the front door, and there was just waterfalls pouring through the ceiling. The whole of the downstairs was like 2 feet underwater. And
Mm.
yeah, a pipe had burst under our bath and had been, yeah, flooding through the ceiling all day. And I remember just standing there, just in complete disbelief, like, oh my God, that this is our home. Like everything was set up for the birth, you know, it was all ready. And my whole body just went cold. And I remember just absolutely just losing it and just howling. And then our toddler was there, and of course you want to protect them. So had to just pull myself together, and we didn't let him see the house. I just bundled him in the car, and I said, right, we're going on holiday to your granny and nanny and papa's house. And we just left. I packed a bag and we left. And again, I was just in complete shock, and we had no idea of timescales. And, you know, we sort of thought, oh, maybe we'll be back in 2 weeks. And it became apparent quite quickly that, you know, the whole house was going to be gutted, dried, remediation work, so a massive insurance job. So yeah, that was the start of March. We were due in 2 weeks. And yeah, I mean, we're in June now, June now. We've still got another month in Airbnb. So it was about a 5 or 6 month remediation job, still ongoing as I'm telling the story. So yeah, we got housed in an Airbnb. luckily, because of our situation, I think the insurance company were very forgiving. So we got to basically choose our Airbnb. So we were in a really nice place, which was good. But, you know, still, it's not your home. And I was very lucky because I think it was the very next day I had a one-to-one session with you booked in anyway. And we just cried and we shook it out and we just, oh, wow, it was so needed and so amazing. And you just held me so well and just got me back into my body. And yeah, so a lot of inner work was needed to get my head back in the game. I think for about 2 weeks, I kept saying to my partner, like, I don't know what we're going to do because and in this headspace, I can't birth. I do not feel safe. And I know that to birth, I need to be feeling safe. And I just kept meditating and dropping into myself and doing all of the work, you know, dream birth visualizations, just listening to positive birth stories, talking to you, like downloading to my friends. And bit by bit, I managed to ground myself. And eventually one day I woke up and I looked around the Airbnb and I just thought, yeah, we can do this here. We can do this here. It doesn't matter where I birth. This is going to be fine. And you had reminded me that, you know, while my mental space wasn't ready, the baby wasn't going to come. Like, the baby is wise, it knows. So I think that took the pressure off me a lot because I realized, you know, I've got time, like, until I'm ready, the baby's not going to be ready. So we just took our time and we re-nested and we put loads of our artwork up in the house and got all our stuff in. And we just made it into our home, created another little birth space, picked up the birth pool, and yeah, we were ready. And then got to 40 weeks, 41 weeks, 41 and a half weeks, and the baby wasn't there. And yeah, it was, yeah, by that point, we were just really excited again and really ready for him to come. Yeah. So should we
It
dive on?
really, yeah, we should dive on in. I was just gonna say, it really goes to show the power of the mind and just what you said, like feeling safe. And well, how many weeks were you when the flood happened again? 38,
38.
yeah. So you had 3.5 weeks of settling, and you needed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of signs of early labor, I was nesting a lot, but that was a lot due to just circumstance as well. I didn't have, you know, I was really watchful for any early signs, particularly got past 41 weeks, everything. I was like, oh, is this it? But there were very few early labor signs. I didn't really experience any Braxton Hicks contractions. I was getting some periody pains, but they didn't come and go like contractions. They were just like a dull ache, similar to how I would get at the start of my period. That would, you know, just last. So I was starting to get those maybe once or twice a day, and they weren't, you know, they weren't painful. I was just aware they were there. And what was interesting is I had this really clear dream, like visualization of how the birth day was going to pan out. And in my mind, we were going to wake up and me, my partner, and my toddler were going to have like pancakes for breakfast, like we do at the weekend. And then we were going to go out in the sunshine and have a lovely day at the park and meet friends. And, you know, I was going to have a beautiful early labor. And then my dad would come get our toddler and take him back to their house. And then, you know, he would labor overnight. And the weekend before the birth, we did all of those things. And I didn't actually birth that weekend, but I think that was all part of my, you know, part of the dream birth. It was just a longer timeline. So it got to a Monday, and in the evening, Monday, the 1st of April, actually, and this was really funny. So it was April Fool's Day here. So I sent a message to my family and I said, oh, we birthed an 11-pound baby. He was birthed on the toilet. And it was just this joke. And I sent a picture of our firstborn when he was like a newborn. And yeah, we were just joking. And I was like, it was really quick. We didn't have time to call the midwife. And and my sister was like, oh my goodness. And then, yeah, we told them it was an April Fool's. But you'll see the irony in that as the story goes on. So that was Monday the 1st. And that evening at like 7 p.m., I started to get quite bad period pains again. And again, they weren't super painful, but they were very noticeable. And again, it wasn't a coming and going of a sensation. It was just this dull kind of cramp was there. And it was more so than before. And I remember saying to my partner, this feels a little bit different, but again, you know, this could be days, like this is just a period cramp, you know, it's not comings and goings. So I don't think it's anything. And he said, should we call your dad to get Huxley, our firstborn? And I just said, well, no, because, you know, it could be 4 more days and then we need to come get him again. So we didn't really know. So we just thought, well, maybe let's just see how everything is in the morning. And then let's call my dad in the morning, whatever happens, to come and get Huxley. So we went to bed, and at 2 a.m. I woke up with quite a strong, again, like this cramp. And it wasn't coming and going, but it was very, it was much more noticeable than before. I had to get up and actually walk around to sort of shift the feeling. So that feeling lasted for about 5 minutes of this kind of cramp sensation. And I was a bit confused because I was thinking, this isn't, you know, these aren't surges that are coming and going every X amount of minutes. This is just this one-off pain. Although it wasn't painful, it was just like a quite a strong feeling. And so that disappeared. And then I was sort of wandering around downstairs thinking, okay, that definitely was something, but, you know, I don't think this is labor. I'm just going to go back to bed. So I went back to bed and I lay there and I decided to listen to a positive birth story because that helps me sleep. That helps me drift off to be listening to something. So I put a story on and very quickly I had to turn it off. And I was starting to feel some sensations coming and going. And I got onto my hands and knees in the bed and I was sort of doing circles. And I thought, oh, okay, this might be something. So at this point, I think it was about 4 a.m. Still very, very minor sensations, but I got up and I went downstairs and I just thought to myself, I'm going to put all of our toddler's toys away and I'm going to set up the room downstairs just so it's nice, put out some candles, and then it's done. And in my mind, I was still thinking, and then tomorrow when we wake up, it will just be done and we won't have to do this. So I cleared away the birth room. And then I was having a few more sensations. And again, I was just pausing to breathe through them. And I think I might have been very quietly sounding at this point, just like a whoa. Then I would carry on. This is about 4:30 in the morning. So at this point, I rung the home birth team. And not because I wanted someone to come out, but because they had said, just let them know the minute you start to feel something, because it's your second baby, you know, things can move quite quickly. And I forgot to say that on the Friday, so 3 days before, I'd had my last midwife checkup at the house, and the baby was like engaged. The midwife was like, wow, this baby is down. So they also thought when labor does start, it could be quite quick. And it was this wonderful midwife called Mary, who was slightly older, who came out on the Friday. And I absolutely loved her. She was like this older, kind of wise woman. You could tell she didn't, she was kind of did her own thing. She was very old school and she was great. And so when I rung the midwife on the early hours of Monday morning, they were like, "Oh, Mary's on shift." And I remember thinking, "Mary, hooray, this is amazing." But I said to her, I said, "Look, I don't think this is anything." I said, "I just wanted to let you know in case things start tomorrow, just so you're prepped." And then while I was on the phone, I had a bigger surge and I had to stop. And I was sort of, down the phone. And the lady at the other end, she was like, "Oh, that's like quite a big one. Do you know what? I'm going to send Mary round." And I said, "Oh, no, no, please don't. I'll be really embarrassed because she'll get here and nothing's happening." And she was like, "Well, that's okay because she can just go home if nothing's happening." So that was lovely. So I said, "Okay, yeah, send Mary round." And I called my dad at that point too. And I just said, "Dad, look, something might be happening, it might not, but maybe come up and get our little boy." And again, in my mind at this point, I was still thinking, it'll be great because tomorrow, me and my partner, we can have a whole day. We can go out for, for breakfast. So yeah, that was all at like 4:30. I'd run both my dad and the home birth team. And then the minute I hung up the phone, I was just absolutely overcome with these like 4 or 5 really big surges. And I was still on my own at this point. My partner was still sleeping. So I just got on my hands and knees and I was leaning over the birth ball. And I very clearly had, it was one of your podcast episodes. I think it was the Ellen Fisher one. I remember her saying that she had this light bulb moment in her third birth where she realized where you feel it the most, that's where you lean into, and you go into that area of sensation and you just embrace it and bring it on basically. And you shy away from it, and that's where you relax. So I had these big sort of waves of sensation come over me, and every time a surge came, I would rock forward over the ball and I just let myself open and I just relaxed my whole body. And where I felt it the most, that's why I was just like, right, open, open, open. And I could feel myself in those moments just kind of opening. It was wild. And I still wouldn't say it was like super painful. I was really sounding through these ones, but it just felt kind of like good. I was working with it. And I just felt like I was really like tapped into my body. And so after I'd had these 3 or 4 big sensations, I thought I should probably go wake my partner up. So I tiptoed into the room because he was sleeping with my partner. And I just said, "You need to come downstairs." This was about 5 o'clock now. So he came downstairs and then quite promptly our toddler woke up again. So he had to go back upstairs because we'd agreed that we weren't going to leave him crying if he was upset. He needs to be with him. So again, I was on my own. So I went back to that all fours position in the front room. And then I suddenly started to feel really odd, like really restless. And I didn't know, that position didn't feel good. I suddenly thought I might be sick. And I was kind of pacing around and I thought, "Oh, I'm just going to go just sit on the loo for a bit and maybe vomit." Which was hindsight, this was my transition. It was very quick, but this was transition. So, and in my mind, this is early labor. I was like, this could go on for another day, 2 days, this could stop. I did not think that that was my active labor bit done. So I went to the loo and I didn't vomit this time. I felt fine. And so I just sat down on the loo even though I didn't need to wee. And then there was this big pop and my waters broke. And I was like, "Oh, cool. Waters are broken." That's exciting. And I hadn't lost my mucus plug at this point either. I'd been waiting for that for weeks. I was quite excited because I didn't have that the first time around. But yeah, still hadn't lost my mucus plug. And then while I was sat on the loo, my waters had just broken. I was suddenly doubled over with this like really big push feeling. And I was like, oh wow, okay. So I decided to check myself. So I stuck a finger up and there was the head. And I remember I sat there for a second and I was like, huh, wow, okay. I'm dilated. And it was really cool being able to do that. And everything felt it was so juicy. It was really amazing to feel that. And it was just the tip of the head. It was very squishy, but it definitely was the head. Um, so I stood up and I remember thinking to myself, right, I'm on my own now because my partner's upstairs and no one's here. I need to sort of think what I need to do. So I called the home birth team back and I said, yeah, there's a head. I think the baby's going to be born soon. How far away is Mary? And the lady, she was so lovely. And she was like, okay, Mary has to go by the hospital to get her bag. So she's going to be about 20 minutes. She said, I want you to call an ambulance because if the baby needs resus, they've got the equipment. And I remember just standing there thinking, oh, I like everything is going perfectly. Like there's no need for an ambulance to come. But I need to make a decision now in the split second because I'm in charge, basically. And so I did decide to call the ambulance. And it was quite funny because I rung them up and I was just every sort of minute or so, I was having these like whopping fish contractions and I was just roaring to have you on the phone. I was like, hang on a minute. And it was just the most ridiculous conversation. And it was like, I shouldn't have been having to do that while I was pushing because, she was trying to get all this information from me. And she was like, and what's actually happening? Has the baby been born? And I was just like, no, it's cut. And it was really ridiculous. But I managed to sort of get out the address and then hung up. And then I was sort of wandering around the house, just like sort of waters trailing behind me. So I was wandering around. And I remember thinking, right, what do I need to do now? And in my mind, I was like, okay, I need to get a plastic sheet down because we're in an Airbnb. We can't destroy this house. So luckily we'd had all our home birth things in a pile already prepared. So I went and got a big shower curtain and I popped it down on the floor in the front room and I put a lovely blanket over it that we were happy to use for the birth. And then I just thought, well, great, that's all I need really. The floor is protected. So then I just stripped off naked, got on my hands and knees, and then I just allowed the sensations to come. And I was just, my body was just pushing and I wasn't doing anything other than just allowing it. And it was these humongous just surges of power would just come. And each time they came, I had this noise come out of me that was just straight from my womb, which was just like this roar. And it just felt so good. And it was like this primal animal, just, yeah, it was just happening. And I was so in my element. And the room was just had candles in it. And I was on my own and it just felt good. And then suddenly I'd left the front door on a latch. So it was this huge bang. And 5 huge ambulance men like stomped into the house and like steel cap boots, I think. They went stomp, 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 like barged into my birth space. These massive like paramedic bags, they just plonked all around me, turned on the light. I just looked up and just looked at them and was like, what are you doing? And I just screamed at them. I basically was like, you need to leave my birth space, get out. And I was like this protective mama bear. And they were quite shocked, I think. And one of them was like, we need to stay. We need to stay. And I said, okay, you can stay outside. If I need you, I will call you, leave. And I was really forceful. And I just basically sent them away.
I love that so much.
Felt really good. I was just in total shock about, this must happen on the regs for them to be called to like a birth that's going quickly. And you would have thought they would have gained some knowledge on like how to enter a birth space.
Nope.
Not to just fling themselves in. So it was just like, wow. So yeah, my partner was still upstairs at this point, and this is like, I don't know, 5:10 in the morning probably. And yeah, at that point, Mary turned up. Oh, it was amazing. So she sent the ambulance men home, obviously. So they all went, that was fine. And she tiptoed in, and she had another midwife with her. And they just had this like most beautiful presence. They just came into the room and really quietly shut the door. Again, it was just candles. They just saw where I was, and she just whispered, "Oh, Nicola, you're doing absolutely amazing. Everything's perfect." She said, "You're absolutely just incredible." And they just kind of sat back and they watched, and she, you know, she measured the heartbeat with the Doppler. And I remember her saying, "Oh, such a beautiful heartbeat. Oh, what a happy baby." And just, you know, these words, I was just filled with this like joy coming through me. And between every push contraction, all the pain left. It just all went away. And so there were these spaces when we were just so joyous, and we were actually like laughing and joking between the push contractions, and it was just a really happy time. And my dad then turned up, and bear in mind I was sort of, you know, I was butt naked. I think I was crowning at the head was poking out. I think I had poop coming out my bum as well. I mean, he poked his head in, and because I was between contractions, I remember turning around and just waving at him, going, "Hi, great. Yeah, Hux was upstairs." I was just on another planet, I think.
Oh,
So he laughed and waved and just gave me a thumbs up. And
bless. I love that so much. I wish there was like a recording of that.
yeah. So he went upstairs, and what was really beautiful is I heard Huxley go, "Papa," and then they ran off to the car together. And I think that was still worrying me a bit that our little boy was upstairs. We had talked about whether we wanted him present at the birth a lot, and because he was just 2.5, and he's quite a sensitive little boy, we didn't feel it was right. I don't think he would have understood what was happening, and I knew that I wouldn't have been able to completely let go while he was there. So yeah, that was really lovely to know he was fine, and he was now safe and out of the house. And then because I had said to the midwives, I don't want anyone else in my birth space, they took that to me and my partner as well. So then my partner finally came downstairs. He was listening to all of this happening, obviously freaking out, like, "Oh my goodness, the ambulance have arrived. What's going on?" And he tried to get in, and the midwife was like, "No, sorry, no one else is." And I turned around and I was like, "No, no, he can come in." Fine. So yeah, he came in, and that was wonderful. And um we had about 20 minutes to go at that point still. So he did witness some of the birth. And it was quite funny when he came in, because I was, you know, I was still in my like primal element, just like completely owning it. And he, bless him, he was trying to like, you know, press my hips in and was saying all these words. And I remember saying to him, "Shut up, don't touch me, just stop what you're doing. I don't need any of that." I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want anyone to be like, you know, saying all these words to me. I was just doing it. But it was in like a loving way, and we were all laughing. And what was amazing was every contraction I had, I just instinctively put my hand on the baby's head, and I left it there throughout each contraction. And it was almost like I wasn't helping it down, but I was feeling it come down. And I just loved that. I was feeling the baby drop with every contraction, and it felt like I was just so in control of this birth. You know, I was just me and the baby, and we were working together to just do this. And I loved that. I loved that. And I could feel the head, you know, descend, and then it would go back up, and it would descend, and it would go back up. And, you know, I know from all of the previous birth stories that that's perfect. That's just the baby doing its thing to make sure you don't, you know, hopefully don't tear. So yeah, the baby started crowning. My partner was there. I was just sort of sounding through each of these contractions, and then eventually we got to the point where the head was there and it stayed. And I knew that on the next one, the head would probably be born. And I thought to myself, I'm going to give it a little push at this point, just to get the head out. And so I did, and the head came out. And we've got a lovely video of this actually, where the baby's head comes out and it stays there, I think for it was over a minute. And in this minute, Billy, that's his name, just opens his eyes really wide and is just like looking around the room, like wide-eyed, like, ooh, what's going on? And I remember in that moment saying, "Oh, hello, baby, hello," and everyone laughing. And then on the next contraction, yeah, he was born. It took quite a lot to push him out on the next one, actually, because I think at that point, a baby would normally rotate, but he didn't. His shoulders stayed where they were. So that, yeah, it wasn't, he came out on that contraction, but I think they had to help him out a little bit. But my partner caught him and passed him through to me, popped him on my chest, and he started crying quite quickly. And it was just so magical. It was just so magical. And there's a picture of me, and I've just got my head back, and I think I'm just laughing my head off with him on my chest. There was a lot of laughter at this moment. And I just absolutely on cloud nine. And my partner was just behind me, and we were just grinning at each other like Cheshire Cat, like, what just happened? And he latched immediately onto my boob and just was feeding, and it just felt so amazing. And we were just led up against the sofa, and we were left well alone, as you're meant to be. And it was just this magical time. And I remember every second of it this time, whereas, first time around, it's all very hazy at that point. So yeah, we were just left there. And then, one of our biggest fears we had this time was hemorrhage, and we talked a lot about that. And I'd done a lot of fear release work with you around that, and talked a lot to the midwives about, what we would do to manage it if I looked like I was bleeding. And yeah, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes after he was born, I think one of the midwives was like, you are losing a bit of blood. Maybe we should talk about having the injection. And I said, I don't want to, but we had pre-agreed that we'd rather prevent losing blood so I didn't have to go to hospital and let it happen. But it was Mary, bless her, who was like, no, let's just hold on a bit longer. Nicola, do you feel like you need to push? And she had a look and she was like, I think it's just there. So I gave her a little push, and then out plopped the placenta. And yeah, I didn't need to.
Mary.
Bless Mary, Hail Mary. And yeah, and then it was all fine. I didn't need to have the injection in my leg, and the bleeding stopped. It was minimal. I felt great. So, I wasn't even starting to feel woozy at all. And yeah, they made a very comfy nest for me on the sofa, with so many shower curtains down, because obviously this is an Airbnb, and they had these plush velvet sofas. So we're like, so yeah, we made a really comfy seat, and then we just made loads of tea and snacks, and it was just so wonderfully mundane and magical all at the same time. And we just heard the recycling lorry outside, and I remember looking at my partner being like, this is just a normal Tuesday morning, and we've birthed a baby, and it just felt so, this is how it should be. This is how it should be. And yeah, and the midwives were so beautiful. They really respected our space. They felt like family, actually. We all had such a lovely bond. And I think my episiotomy did open up. And I think it's because he didn't turn, so his shoulders opened it. So I had to have a few stitches, but again, the way they did it it was night and day to the hospital. They were so gentle. Every step of the way, they were just asking, is this okay? Is this all fine? And it's all on my terms, at my own pace.
Mm. That's
So
so
it didn't feel
deeply,
like
deeply healing, isn't it, to have that experience?
so healing. And then they left. And it was just me and my partner sat there with our new baby. We were looking at each other like, what in the hell just happened? Because he was born at 5:59.
Wow.
So it was 4 a.m. I had the first like niggle. And then 2 hours later, he was born.
Mm. That is such a fast birth. Like, wow. And I mean, it goes to show though, like, when you did get induced, like it was very fast then too, right? Very fast, especially for being cold induction at 37 weeks. Like 37 weeks, the failure to progress with an
Yeah.
induction is super high and it can go for days and days. Like I've even been with women where it's been like 4 or 5 days, like, because the body's just not ready. But you have this amazing body. It's just like so efficient. Even when she's like, forced like she was the first time, but this time when she wasn't, holy smokes. And
No.
for everyone listening, how much does this baby weigh?
8 pounds.
Oh my God.
My birth an 8-pound baby. Can you believe it? But it
Yeah.
shows how much, because again, I was bigger this time, but I still wasn't carrying big. So I thought, oh, if we make 7 pounds, that's going to be incredible. So it
Yeah.
shows as well, like bump size doesn't always indicate how big your baby
Oh no, absolutely. And some babies are lying towards women's backs, and some women carry really in their front and look bigger than so totally that. And like some are very tall, they're like torso, so it's more space, and some are short. Like it's totally. But what I also want to say is that baby spent a month longer
Yeah.
inside, and it's really, especially past 40 weeks, like each day they just put on so much more fat. It's really fat. They're getting fattened up in the end. And that makes sense when you think about then like, well, it doesn't make sense. That's what I would say. With women now being induced at 39 weeks, 40 weeks, with the stillbirth fear mongering that's going on. Like this is just taking over the world right now. Like obstetrician pushing for this, these babies are not getting that. They're not getting that. And it's for, developmental as well, like brain development and nervous system and all of this. This is happening in the last weeks and days.
And what's so interesting as well is, I'm a real believer in like birth imprints and how they impact you. And we're witnessing it with our two kids. Like our first one, I'll always hold sadness the way he was born. And he's a really happy little kid, but he's super sensitive. He's needed so much reassurance in life with everything. Like sleeping is still really poor, even though he's nearly 3. He's taken a long time to do things like crawling, walking, much longer than other babies. And this little one, our new one, is just so chill. He's just so chill. He's already just like, sleeping really well, and just it could all change. But yeah, I think the births do have a significant impact on the baby.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we dive into this a lot in the mentorship, don't we? Both about your own birth imprint and your babies and the great mystery around it as well. And yeah, it does. It's really clear when you look at it that your birth really informs. And you can obviously work with that, become aware of that, reprogram things. Um, but yeah, it's very clear, isn't it? What kind of birth you have and also what kind of personality and maybe challenges and gifts that bring to you as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm, beautiful. Wow. I mean, I absolutely love your birth story. And I can just see you. I love how you paint this picture. I can see you on all fours. I can see you screaming at the ambulance people. I can see you roaring, and in my mind, I just see you as this powerhouse lioness mama, just like doing it all. I absolutely love your birth story.
Yeah.
If you had a first time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby, and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdom would you give to her?
Hmm. I think don't wing it. So really take ownership of your birth and, you know, take the responsibility to educate yourself. And it's a shame you have to do that, but if you're aiming to have a natural birth, or birth in the hospital particularly, you need to know like what interventions they're going to offer you. You need to know what your rights are, and I think just be really informed, and just so you can navigate the system. And if you can afford it as well, having a birth keeper, a doula, a sacred birth, worker with you, that is absolutely invaluable. It can make all the difference. So yeah, don't wing it. And I think what really helped me the second time around was just listen and watch positive birth stories. I mean, that in itself, that will give you the knowledge you need without having to do research, just listen to the stories. And that positive birth story medicine, it's just transforms, it reprograms your subconscious mind, doesn't it, to
Mm.
believe that it's possible and to really trust that your body can do this. And so I think I listened to like all of the episodes in your podcast and watched so many like videos online. It was interesting as well because initially I had a resistance to watching birth videos. And then once I started, it was like I couldn't stop. It was like they were amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah, just those two things and you'll be
Mm. I couldn't agree more. And there was one thing with your story that also, like now listening to it, because obviously I've heard it twice already, and still I'm like finding nuggets and I'm like, oh, this one. So like when you had those kind of that early ones in your less than 2 hour long labor and birth, but those like at four, was it 4 o'clock or something, for 4:30 when you decided to call the midwives, instantly when you hung up and you called your dad. So you organized, you knew help was coming. You knew Mary, the one that you really resonated with, was coming. Your dad was coming to take your precious boy. Instantly hanging up,
Mm.
you went into boom, active labor.
Yeah, that's true.
And this goes to show that, like so much with the birthing, right? It's like it's optimizing, right? I always talk about that. Optimizing, right? Having your natural empowering birth. It's like having the right people, right? Like having the right person that was Mary for you, and it was your dad, caring for your boy. And it shows you how primal we are. You weren't thinking, okay, I need to do this and then I'm going to go into active labor. But because you did that, you put things in place, you could fully then go into active labor because you knew, okay, I've done everything. You cleared your space, you had your birth space set up, everything was fine to like bam, drop in. And instantly your body went, I'm safe. Boom, doing it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that pace.
And what was amazing was in that time, I just had all these voices of women
Mm.
from your stories and, from our course. They were just ringing through my head of like the pearls of wisdom they had shared. And that's what I had going through my head. And it was like I knew what my body just knew what to do because it was so ingrained in my subconscious. Like,
Mm.
just relax, it's fine, it's totally fine. Like this is all exactly what's meant to be happening.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because one of the girls from our course, when we did our birth debrief, she was curious as to did I ever go into that liminal labor land space? Did I ever completely go into that other kind of realm you do? And I didn't in this birth. There wasn't time for those kind of hormones to build up to that peak. And initially I had a bit of sadness about that I didn't get to sort of go fully into that labor land where you can just let go. But this was the birth that was absolutely intended to happen. And I guess I did surrender in those 5 contractions. I did.
Yes, you
I did
did.
let go.
You
Yeah.
did. You fully did. And, it also, I love because both your births, labor and births were fast. When you look at them, your first birth was really fast as well. But you felt really overwhelmed then, and they came on top of you because you weren't in a place where you were feeling fully safe. And you weren't, I mean, it really goes to show that because you were in a space, you had made that Airbnb your space, you had done so much prep work that you really knew was all within you. Didn't matter that it wasn't your home, like you had done the inner work for that. You knew you were having Mary come, you knew your dad was coming, like, and you could fully go into the labor and birth sensations, not fearing them. And they were bloody intense, I can imagine, even though they were only 2 hours. That's really, like, a quick birth can really shock the system and really shock you. But you took it in your stride and you leant into it even and went like, welcome. I mean, I absolutely love your story. And I hope you do too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nix, for coming and sharing it. I believe many people will absolutely love your story.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as the Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.